You joined the Druidic circle at age 12, and you had so much hopes for being a druid, but your studies hadn't gone well. So, at age 14, you decided to really dive into spell research, and you'd made some really wonderful gains. You'd made up for some of the other skills that you hadn't quite done as well in. And over time, your confidence grew and those skills caught up. But in the process, just after you turned 15, you'd found an unusual summoning spell, one that intrigued you. It took you 5 months to pull together all the ingredients you needed to cast the spell. It wasn't easy. I mean, as an apprentice, you have duties. You have lots of things keeping you busy, almost constantly from sunup to sundown. But you pulled it off. And finally, you were able to steal away a few hours and take yourself off into the forest where no one was around and actually cast the spell. Now, it wasn't easy. It was a full 8-hour casting. It was a strain. You'd never cast a spell this long. And you weren't sure if you could even keep the chant up the way you had to. But every time you began to lag, every time your concentration began to falter, you remembered your goal. If you could do this, then you knew that when you turned 16, you had to take your year off, your journeyman's test. You'd make it. If you could get through this, all the lack of confidence you'd had in the past wouldn't matter. You would have proven to yourself, as well as your druid mentors, that you could also be a druid. And after 8 solid hours of casting, of chanting, waving your hands in manners that made no sense to you at some points, the brilliant flash of light, and when the motes cleared from your eyelids and you opened your eyes, floating in the air before you was this. Just this. You looked at it more than a little skeptically. You waved your hand and cast a detect magic cantrip, Orison, or as it knows to the druids. And yeah, it was magic, particularly of the transmutation variety. And that was a little unusual. You had cast a summoning spell, but there it was, floating in the air. So you reached out and you plucked it up from the air. And you held in your hand a twig. And not a particularly interesting twig. But damn it, you'd done a lot of research. You'd gathered a lot of components. And you'd tested yourself with this spell. And you weren't going to let this disappear. So you slipped it into your possibles bag, along with all the other bits and bobs that you've collected over the years of your training. The things that you knew you would need out there in the forests alone. And you went about your business. You finished up your apprenticeship. And on your 16th birthday, you headed out into the forest to survive on your own. You walked into the Sylvan land because part of the test was you had to avoid civilization. And the most uncivilized place you could imagine, anyone could imagine, were the Sylvan lands. Places that not even the elves lived. The places where the Fae still dwelled. The places where creatures, both good and evil and just damn dangerous, dwelled. And you did pretty well for yourself. Not only were you able to survive out there, but you were able to avoid situations that would have brought you in contact with civilized peoples. Because even in the Sylvan lands, the civilized folks would invade. Not dwellers, not settlers, but adventurers, poachers. And you were able to drive off one of those groups without them ever knowing you were there. Scared the living crap out of them, in fact. Made them think that there were things in the forest that they really didn't want to face. And you did find yourself get jumped once while meditating by some goblins. You sent them scattering too, but they left 3 behind that were ever going to harm anyone again. And at the end of your journey, you found it. You were 22 days out from the end. Dates are hard to pin down out there. When you found the glaive, you didn't know why it was right. You didn't know how it was right. All you knew was that you could taste it. And somehow you knew that the little twig had something to do with this glaive. And you knew that this was going to be just as hard as when you cast the first spell. So you took out your twig and you laid it on the ground. And you took your hand away, and for a second you know it wasn't right. It wasn't right. So you decided you needed to dig a hole for it. And you reached for your digging stick. But no. This wasn't 4 tools this time. Not even ones made from wood that you'd made with your own hands. No. You used your fingers. You pulled up the sod and you scooped out the earth. You lay your twig in the hole and you covered it over. You lay the sod back in place and you smoothed it till only you would be able to tell it was there. Maybe other druids might see it, possibly skilled rangers, but no one else would, and you knew it. Your training had been good, and you'd listened and you'd learned. So with your twig in the ground, you cast your spell. You knew it would be long, but this time your hand motions were sure, and your chant was even and strong. And it came from the center of you. It came from the place of power. And you hit the 8-hour mark. And you knew it wasn't over. You knew it was time to be quiet. So you sat there, your lotus position, and you just were. You didn't think. You listened and you felt. You sunk into the earth in spirit. You sat that way, unmoving, unflinching. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And part of your brain said, it's dangerous now. This is dangerous now. But that was the scared animal inside you. You are more than the scared animal now. You were on a path past the scared animal. You were part of nature, and nature takes its time. 5 days, 6, and on the 7th, when that voice was weakly telling you, come out or you will not survive, you felt the stir. You don't know how you felt it. It wasn't a physical sensation, but you felt the stir. When you opened your eyes, before you was a sapling. You think it was an ash. You weren't quite able to tell. The leaves were so new. And a little smile crept on your face through parched lips. While you sat there contemplating it, the sapling, it moved. Its roots went out of the ground, and it stood up on legs, and its trunk shimmered. And out came 2 arms, and it reached out, and it covered itself. And when it pulled its hands away, there were eyes that looked back at you. And then the bark split, and there was a mouth that smiled. A crooked smile, but a smile nonetheless. And you laughed. You took a drink of water, and you shared some with your new friend. You ate some food. You smiled at the sun. You stood up. You stretched. You bent down and you picked up your friend. You put your friend on your shoulder. You began to stride back towards the Druidic circle. You knew the direction now. You knew it as well as you knew the back of your own hand. You didn't need to look at a compass. You didn't need to even look at the sky. You just knew where it was. It was the center of your universe, the way your power was at your center. And you strode home. And you didn't need the circle to tell you that you are a druid now. Because you knew. This was inspired by a real world twig, this twig right here, which my wife gave it to me. She had inadvertently purchased it, carried it home, brought it home on her pack, I believe, or might have been her boots, while she was out doing some work at a camp, and gave it to me. I'm not quite sure why, but she did. So I've decided to use it as an inspiration for a video. This became the inspiration for a plant companion for a druid, and I believe there are actual animal companion options available, and one of them is a plant that starts out as a sapling and eventually becomes a tree, and that's what this would become eventually. It starts out as a tiny creature. I would probably have it grow fully up to a small, and then maybe as a eventually bumping up to something much larger, maybe going to medium. I think now wolves go to medium and large, so it makes sense for the tree probably to start at medium and then go to large. Probably rapid growth to medium, and then medium to large when it gets to whatever, like 5th level or something like that. And of course, that option would be available to rangers too, I guess, if you wanted to have a ranger having a plant companion as opposed to an animal companion. I'd have to look up the specifics on the plant companions for druids. I know there are there. I've got a Pathfinder first edition app on my phone. I was poking at it at one point, I believe, and looking at the options available, and some of them are plants. So I hope you find this useful, and I hope that your experiences as your first level druid were pleasant. So tell me, if you were playing a first level druid, what would you choose as an animal companion? Heck, let's throw this out there. If you were a first level druid in the real world, what would you choose as your animal companion? I think the best thing to choose as in the real world would be a dog, a large dog, because dogs start out as small and go to medium, which is a much more reasonable size for a creature, and are going to blend in perfectly well with the world at large. I would choose a Rottweiler, because the Rottweiler is my favorite large dog breed. The uncut variety of Rottweilers, they're without their ears cropped and their tail chopped off. I realized that those were done originally because they would be in combat, but it's cruel and there's no reason to do it. Even if you're adventuring, I think that's cruel. No druid in their right mind would crop their animal companion's body just for aesthetics or for combat. They accept that sometimes things just happen. And if ears gets notched or tails get nipped, that's just the way it is. So tell me, what would you choose in a fantasy setting or in the real world? In a fantasy setting, I'd probably go with the wolf, because I've always really liked wolves, though bears are good, and I have a fairly great deal of affinity for bears. The black bear in particular would be kind of cool, because the black bear, I believe, also does it go medium large? I think it goes medium large for the black bear, which makes sense. Black bears are big, but they're not huge. They're actually, in the real world, a big male bear, black bear, is going to be in the 400-pound range. Females are much smaller. They're almost in the normal weight range of a human. But the males can get quite large. I've been in front of a 450-pound black bear before. I had an opportunity to actually touch one at an animal sanctuary, essentially, and it was very cool. So let's talk about animal companions and plant companions, and tell me if you found this interesting.